There is a kind of strength the world does not celebrate loudly. It is not the strength that stands on stages, nor the one that demands attention. It is quiet, steady, almost invisible. True strength rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with noise, recognition, or applause. It moves quietly beneath the surface where no one is watching. Many people have been taught to associate strength with visibility, with being seen, praised, or acknowledged by others. But the deepest form of strength exists far from the eyes of the world. It lives in the moments that no one records, in the decisions that no one applauds, and in the discipline that no one notices. A woman begins to understand this when she stops performing her pain for others. There comes a point where explaining, proving, or seeking validation becomes exhausting. She realizes that growth is not something that needs an audience. It is something that requires honesty, and honesty is often a quiet process. It asks her to sit with herself without distraction, without escape, and to face what is real. In those moments, there is no one to impress. There is no image to maintain. There is only truth, and truth can feel uncomfortable. It can reveal weaknesses, fears, and patterns that have been ignored for too long. But instead of turning away, she stays. She observes. She listens. This is where real strength begins, not in reacting, but in understanding. The world may not see her choosing silence over unnecessary arguments. It may not notice her walking away from situations that once held power over her. It may not recognize the effort it takes for her to change her habits, her thinking, her responses. But none of that makes her efforts less meaningful. In fact, it is what makes them powerful, because what is built in silence is often more stable than what is built for display. There is a discipline in choosing growth when no one is encouraging you. There is a quiet resilience in continuing forward without external motivation. She learns to rely less on praise and more on purpose. She begins to understand that if her progress depends on others noticing, it will never be consistent. So she removes that dependency. She continues even when it feels like nothing is changing, even when results are not immediate. This kind of strength reshapes her from the inside. It teaches her patience. It teaches her control. She no longer feels the need to react instantly, to prove a point, or to be understood by everyone. She becomes more selective with her energy. She begins to recognize that not every situation deserves her attention, and not every opinion deserves her response. Silence, in this way, is not weakness. It is a form of mastery. It allows her to think clearly, to act intentionally, and to remain grounded when everything around her feels uncertain. While others may seek constant noise to feel secure, she finds stability within herself. She becomes less influenced by external chaos and more guided by internal clarity. Over time, this quiet strength becomes her foundation. It is not something that can be easily shaken, because it was not built on temporary validation. It was built through consistent, unseen effort, through moments of doubt that she chose to face, through days when she kept going without knowing if it would pay off. And even though the world may not recognize it immediately, that does not diminish its value. Because true strength was never meant to be displayed. It was meant to be lived. There comes a moment when illusion falls away, when all the quiet expectations a person once held begin to dissolve. The expectation that someone will understand without being told, that someone will step in at the right time, that someone will carry the weight when it becomes too heavy. At first, letting go of this belief feels uncomfortable, almost unsettling. It can feel like standing alone in a vast, open space with nothing to hold on to. But within that realization lies a different kind of power, one that does not depend on anyone else. A woman begins to see that waiting is not neutral. Waiting slowly drains her energy, her time, and her sense of direction. It keeps her suspended between what is and what could be. When she accepts that no one is coming to rescue her, something shifts, the waiting stops. The hesitation begins to fade. She no longer places her life on hold, hoping for the right person, the right moment, or the right circumstances. She understands that movement must come from within. This realization does not make her hard. It makes her responsible. She starts to take ownership of her choices, her reactions, and her path forward. Instead of asking why something happened to her, she begins to ask what she can learn from it. Instead of focusing on what she lacks, she starts working with what she already has. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything. It moves her from a place of dependency to a place of creation. There are still moments of difficulty. There are still days when the weight feels heavy, when the silence feels too loud, when the absence of support is deeply felt. But she no longer interprets these moments as signs of weakness. She understands that discomfort is part of growth. She does not run from it, nor does she allow it to define her. She continues, even when it would be easier to stop. With time, she builds trust in herself, not through words, but through action. Each decision she makes, each step she takes without relying on someone else, becomes evidence. Evidence that she is capable. Evidence that she can endure. Evidence that she can rebuild, even when the outcome is uncertain. This kind of trust cannot be given by others. It must be earned through experience. She also begins to see relationships differently. She no longer looks for someone to complete her or to fill what she feels is missing. Instead, she values connection without dependency. She can appreciate support without needing it to function. This changes the way she interacts with others. There is less pressure, less fear, and less attachment to outcomes. She becomes more present, more grounded, and more aware. Self-reliance also brings clarity. It removes distractions and forces her to focus on what truly matters. She becomes more intentional with her time, her energy, and her decisions. She no longer spreads herself thin, trying to meet expectations or gain approval. She chooses carefully, knowing that her resources are limited and valuable. There is a quiet confidence that grows from this way of living. It is not loud or demanding. It does not seek attention. It is steady and calm. It comes from knowing that regardless of what happens, she will find a way forward. Not because everything will be easy, but because she has proven to herself that she can handle difficulty. And in that space, where reliance on others no longer defines her, she becomes free to shape her own direction. Pain has a way of arriving without invitation. It does not ask if the timing is right, and it does not adjust itself to comfort. Most people instinctively resist it. They distract themselves, suppress it, or try to escape it as quickly as possible. This reaction feels natural, but it often keeps them trapped in the same patterns. A woman who chooses a different approach begins to see pain not as something to fight, but as something to understand. At first, this is not easy. Sitting with pain requires stillness, and stillness removes all distractions. There is no noise to hide behind, no external focus to shift attention away. There is only the experience itself, raw, unfiltered, and often uncomfortable. But instead of turning away, she allows herself to remain present. She observes what she feels without immediately trying to change it. In this observation, something important happens. The intensity begins to separate from the meaning. She starts to notice that pain is not only about what happened, but also about how it is interpreted. Thoughts begin to surface, beliefs about worth, fear of loss, memories of past experiences. She sees how these thoughts amplify the feeling, how they add layers to something that is already heavy. This awareness does not remove the pain instantly, but it changes her relationship with it. Rather than becoming overwhelmed, she becomes curious. She asks herself what this pain is showing her. Is it revealing an attachment that has become unhealthy? Is it exposing a boundary that was ignored? Is it pointing towards something within her that needs attention or care? These questions shift her focus from reaction to reflection. Instead of being controlled by the pain, she begins to learn from it. There is also a discipline in not acting immediately on what is felt. Pain can create urgency, the urge to respond, to fix, to escape. But she learns to pause. In that pause, she creates space between feeling and action. This space is where growth takes place. It allows her to respond with clarity rather than impulse. It prevents her from repeating the same mistakes that once kept her stuck. Over time, she notices patterns. Certain situations trigger familiar emotions. Certain behaviors lead to predictable outcomes. By paying attention, she begins to understand herself more deeply. She recognizes where she has been giving too much, where she has been accepting less than she deserves, where she has been holding on when she should have let go. Pain becomes a signal, not a punishment. It points toward areas that require change. This process also builds resilience. Each time she faces discomfort without avoiding it, she strengthens her ability to endure. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once caused confusion becomes clear. She no longer fears pain in the same way because she knows it will pass and that it carries information she can use. There is a quiet strength in this approach. It is not about becoming emotionless or unaffected. It is about becoming aware and intentional. She still feels deeply, but she is no longer controlled by what she feels. She does not allow temporary emotions to dictate permanent decisions. Instead, she listens, learns, and then chooses her next step carefully. In this way, pain transforms from something that weakens her into something that refines her. It shapes her understanding, sharpens her awareness, and deepens her connection to herself. And while others may continue to run from discomfort, she stands still long enough to see what it has to teach. Change rarely arrives as a sudden transformation. It does not appear overnight in a way that is obvious or dramatic. Instead, it forms quietly through repetition, through choices that seem small and almost insignificant in the moment. A woman who understands this begins to shift her focus away from quick results and toward consistent action. She stops looking for breakthroughs and starts building structure. Discipline becomes her foundation, not the kind that feels forced or rigid, but the kind that is rooted in awareness. She begins to notice how her daily habits shape her state of mind. The way she starts her morning, the thoughts she entertains, the actions she repeats. These become the building blocks of her identity. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, she moves even when she does not feel ready. She understands that feelings are temporary, but actions create direction. There are days when resistance appears. The mind looks for comfort, for ease, for familiar patterns that require less effort. It suggests delay, distraction, or avoidance. In those moments, discipline becomes a quiet decision. She does not argue with the resistance, nor does she give it power. She simply acts. Even if the step is small, she takes it. This breaks the cycle of inaction and reinforces a new pattern, one where movement is chosen over stagnation. Over time, these small actions begin to accumulate. What once required effort starts to feel natural. What once felt uncomfortable becomes part of her routine. She does not rely on bursts of energy or inspiration. Instead, she creates a rhythm, a steady pace that allows her to continue regardless of external circumstances. This consistency becomes more valuable than intensity. It allows progress to continue even on difficult days. Discipline also requires honesty. She begins to see where she has been inconsistent, where she has made excuses, where she has avoided responsibility. This is not a process of self-judgment, but of clarity. Without clarity, there can be no real change. She takes ownership of her patterns, understanding that awareness is the first step toward transformation. Once she sees clearly, she can begin to adjust. She starts to set boundaries with herself, not in a restrictive way, but in a way that protects her focus and energy. She becomes more intentional with how she spends her time. Activities that once drained her begin to lose their place in her life. Distractions become easier to recognize. She chooses actions that align with who she is becoming, rather than who she used to be. There is also patience in this process. She understands that lasting change does not happen quickly. There are moments where progress feels slow, where results are not immediately visible. In the past, this might have led to frustration or giving up. But now, she remains steady. She trusts the process, knowing that consistency will eventually lead to growth. She no longer measures her progress only by outcomes, but by her ability to continue. Failures still occur. There are days when she falls back into old habits, when discipline feels distant. But instead of seeing this as a reason to stop, she uses it as feedback. She reflects on what led to that moment, what can be adjusted, what can be learned. This removes the emotional weight of failure and turns it into something constructive. Each setback becomes part of the process rather than the end of it. As discipline strengthens, so does her sense of control, not control over everything, but control over her actions and responses. She becomes less reactive and more intentional. She does not allow temporary emotions to disrupt her long-term direction. She recognizes that growth requires stability, and stability is built through repeated, conscious choices. This approach also changes how she views effort. Effort is no longer something to avoid, but something to embrace. It becomes a sign that she is moving in the right direction. She no longer looks for the easiest path, but for the path that leads to development. This shift in perspective removes resistance and replaces it with purpose. Gradually, her identity begins to change. She is no longer someone who waits, hesitates, or depends on circumstances. She becomes someone who acts, adapts, and continues. This identity is not created through words, but through repeated behavior. Each disciplined action reinforces who she is becoming. Each moment of consistency strengthens that image. People around her may not immediately notice these changes. From the outside, everything may appear the same. But internally, there is a clear shift. She feels more grounded, more focused, more aligned. She is no longer pulled in multiple directions by distractions or impulses. Her actions follow a clear intention. This transformation is not based on perfection. It does not require flawless execution or constant success. It is built on persistence, the willingness to continue, even when progress feels slow, the ability to return to the path after moments of distraction, the commitment to keep moving forward, regardless of how small the steps may be. In this way, discipline becomes more than a habit. it becomes a way of living. It shapes how she thinks, how she acts, and how she responds to challenges. It gives her the ability to build something stable and lasting within herself. And through this steady, consistent effort, she creates a version of herself that is no longer defined by past patterns, but by conscious, deliberate choice. And so, she no longer waits for the world to recognize her strength. She no longer seeks approval for the battles she has fought in silence. Because she knows what she has built within herself cannot be taken away. She has walked through uncertainty without guidance. She has faced pain without escape. She has changed, not because it was easy, but because she chose not to remain the same. There is a quiet power in that, a power that does not need to prove itself, a power that does not break under pressure, a power that stands firm even when everything else feels unstable. She understands now that rebuilding herself was never about becoming perfect. It was about becoming aware, becoming disciplined, becoming whole on her own terms. And in that wholeness, she finds peace. Not the kind that depends on circumstances, but the kind that comes from within, steady, grounded, and unshaken. This is the strength of a woman who rebuilds herself alone, not loud, not visible to everyone, but real, unbreakable, and entirely her own.